Unlock the eternal wisdom hidden in the Gospel of John. What if the greatest mysteries of life, the answers to your deepest questions, were not hidden in the stars or the depths of science, but in a story written nearly 2,000 years ago? What if the Gospel of John held the key to unlocking truths so profound they could transform the way you live, love, and think? Today, we're diving deep into this timeless text, not as an ancient relic, but as a living guide to the most pressing challenges of modern life. Picture this: a man stands in the middle of a crowded street, consumed by his own failures. Around him, people rush by, indifferent, lost in their own chaos. He feels invisible, unworthy. Then imagine someone stepping forward, not to judge, but to meet his gaze with love so powerful it pierces through every layer of shame and fear. That's the heart of the Gospel of John, a message of radical love, redemption, and purpose that can pull any of us out of the darkest pits. The Gospel begins with an extraordinary declaration: "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Pause for a moment. What does that mean to you? The Word, the Logos, isn't just about language. It's the essence of life, the force that brings order out of chaos. Have you ever felt like your life was spiraling, like chaos was winning? What if aligning yourself with this eternal wisdom could bring clarity and peace? John's Gospel invites us into a story where every encounter brims with meaning. When Jesus meets Nicodemus under the cover of night, they discuss being born again. It's a concept that challenges the logical mind but resonates deeply with the soul. Have you ever wished you could start over, not just a new job, relationship, or city, but a complete renewal of who you are? That's the invitation here, to embrace a fresh start. One born and not of circumstances but of spirit. Think about the woman at the well, a social outcast drawing water alone, shunned by her community. Jesus doesn't avoid her, he seeks her out. He speaks of living water that quenches a thirst no physical drink ever could. What's your deepest thirst? Is it for validation, success, security? Or is it something even deeper? Something you can't quite name? Now, imagine this: what if the answer isn't found in achieving more, but in receiving something you've been too afraid or too distracted to accept? As we explore these stories, let's bring them into our world. Imagine Nicodemus as a modern intellectual, someone who's built his life on knowledge but still feels an ache for something more. Picture the woman at the well as a single mother, balancing two jobs, carrying shame from past choices, and yearning for dignity. How often do we judge others without seeing their humanity, their struggles, their quiet hopes? When Jesus declares, "I am the light of the world," he's not just talking about himself. He's inviting us to step out of the shadows of fear, doubt, and despair. But here's the challenge: are we willing to embrace the light, even when it exposes the parts of ourselves we'd rather hide? John's Gospel doesn't shy away from the hard truths. It reveals betrayal, loss, and sacrifice. But it also offers hope, a hope grounded not in avoiding pain but in transforming it. Take the story of Lazarus, a man dead for 4 days. His sisters mourn, their faith wavering. Yet, Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, proving that even death doesn't have the final word. Have you ever felt like parts of your life were dead, dreams abandoned, relationships broken, hope extinguished? What if those moments weren't the end but the beginning of something miraculous? Let's talk about one of the most profound moments in John, the washing of the disciples' feet. Picture this: Jesus, the teacher, the leader, kneels before his friends to serve them. In a world obsessed with power and status, this act flips everything upside down. Who among us is willing to serve with no expectation of reward? And then there's the cross. It's more than a symbol of sacrifice, it's a declaration that love is stronger than hate. That grace triumphs over judgment. What would it look like for you to live with that kind of love, not a fleeting emotion, but a daily choice to give, forgive, and believe in the goodness of others? As we close this first part of the journey, I want to leave you with a question. What if the Gospel of John isn't just a story about Jesus, but a mirror held up to your own soul? What parts of your life are waiting to be awakened by the eternal wisdom hidden in its pages? How the teachings of Christ transform pain into power. Pain is a universal experience. It crosses boundaries, transcends cultures, and spares no one. But what if pain wasn't just something to endure? What if it held the seeds of transformation, the potential to awaken a deeper power within us? The Gospel of John is more than a collection of stories, it's a roadmap for turning suffering into strength, despair into purpose, and wounds into wisdom. Think about this: pain often feels isolating, like you're carrying a weight no one else can understand. Yet, in the Gospel of John, Jesus enters the world not as a distant deity but as someone who fully shares in human suffering. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. This single line changes everything. It's a reminder that God doesn't just see your pain, he enters into it, experiences it, and redeems it. Let's return to the story of Lazarus. When Jesus arrives, he sees the tears of Mary and Martha, their raw grief over their brother's death. And what does he do? He weeps. Let that sink in for a moment. The one who has the power to raise the dead stops to mourn. Why? Because love doesn't bypass pain, it moves through it. Have you ever allowed yourself to fully feel your own grief? Or do you rush to suppress it, fearing it will consume you? Now imagine this, in your darkest moments. What if there was someone beside you who wasn't trying to fix you but was simply present, sharing in your sorrow? That's the kind of presence Jesus offers, a presence that acknowledges the weight of your pain while pointing you toward hope. But the story doesn't end with tears. Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, showing us that even in death, there is the possibility of new life. Here's the challenge: what tombs are you living in right now? Are they built from fear, shame, or the belief that your best days are behind you? And what would it take for you to step out of them? Let's talk about betrayal. When Jesus shares his last meal with his disciples, he knows that Judas will betray him. Yet, he washes Judas's feet alongside everyone else's. Imagine knowing someone would betray you and still choosing to serve them. Could you do it? This act isn't about condoning betrayal, it's about demonstrating a love that isn't dictated by others' actions. Betrayal often leaves us bitter, closing our hearts to trust and love. But the Gospel of John challenges us to respond differently, not by ignoring the hurt but by choosing to love in spite of it. This isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. Think about your own life. Who has hurt you? And what would it look like to let go of the bitterness? Not for their sake but for your own freedom. Then there's the crucifixion. On the surface, it's the ultimate defeat, humiliation, suffering, and death. But Jesus transforms it into the greatest act of love. When he says, "It is finished," He's not declaring defeat. He's proclaiming victory over sin, fear, and death itself. What if your greatest struggles could become the foundation of your greatest triumphs? Consider your own experiences of failure and loss. Have they made you bitter or better? The cross invites us to see our pain not as the end but as a doorway to transformation. It's not about ignoring the hurt but finding meaning in it. A purpose that can propel you forward. One of the most striking moments in John is when Jesus appears to his disciples after the resurrection. Thomas, filled with doubt, demands to see the wounds before he believes. Jesus doesn't rebuke him, he invites him to touch the scars. Think about that. The risen Christ carries his scars as a testament to what he endured and overcame. What are your scars? And are you hiding them out of shame? Or could they become a testimony of your resilience? Scars don't just remind us of where we've been, they show us how far we've come. The Gospel of John also teaches us about surrender. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus prays, "Not my will, but yours be done." It's a moment of profound vulnerability. A surrender to something greater than himself. How often do we cling to control? Fighting against the inevitable? What would it look like to surrender, not in defeat, but in trust that there's a greater plan at work? As we draw closer to the end of this part, let's reflect on the transformative power of pain. The Gospel of John doesn't promise a life free from suffering, but it does offer a way to move through it with purpose. Pain can harden your heart, or it can open it to greater love. The choice is yours. So, let me ask you, what would happen if you stopped seeing pain as an enemy and started seeing it as a teacher? What wisdom is your pain trying to reveal to you? Living in the light, how John's Gospel guides us to a life of purpose and peace. Imagine walking into a dark room where you can't see anything, not the furniture, the walls, or the path ahead. You move cautiously, afraid of tripping, unsure of where to go. Now imagine someone flipping on the light. Suddenly, everything becomes clear. The Gospel of John tells us that Jesus is that light. "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." But what does it mean to live in this light? And how does it guide us toward a life of purpose and peace? Let's start with the idea of light itself. Light reveals what is hidden. It exposes both beauty and flaws, truth and illusion. Living in the light requires courage because it means facing the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden. Have you ever hesitated to examine your own heart because you were afraid of what you might find? John's Gospel reminds us that this light doesn't expose us to condemn but to heal. When Jesus encounters the woman caught in adultery, the crowd demands judgment. But Jesus says, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone." One by one, they walk away, leaving her alone with him. He says, "Neither do I condemn you. Go now and leave your life of sin." Think about that. The light of Christ doesn't shame us, it frees us. It calls us to leave behind what holds us back and step into a new way of living. What are the stones in your life, judgments, fears, habits that you need to drop? Living in the light also means embracing truth. Jesus declares, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." But truth isn't always comfortable. It challenges our assumptions, confronts our biases, and asks us to align our lives with something greater than ourselves. How often do we settle for half-truths because they're easier to accept than the full reality? The gospel shows us that truth is not just an abstract concept, it's a person. To know Christ is to know truth, not as a weapon to wield against others, but as a mirror that reflects who we are and who we're called to be. What truths are you avoiding right now? And what would it look like to face them with courage and grace? Let's talk about peace. In a world filled with anxiety, division, and chaos, peace can feel elusive. But Jesus offers a peace that is not dependent on circumstances. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. The world's peace is temporary, it's tied to success, comfort, or the absence of conflict. But the peace of Christ is deeper. It's the kind of peace that allows you to stand firm in the storm, to forgive when it's easier to hold a grudge, to trust when the future is uncertain. What would your life look like if you embraced this kind of peace? Purpose and peace go hand in hand. One of the most profound moments in John's Gospel is when Jesus washes his disciples' feet. It's an act of humility and service. A reminder that true greatness is found not in being served but in serving others. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. How often do we measure our worth by what we achieve or how others perceive us? Living in the light calls us to redefine success, not as power or recognition, but as love in action. Who in your life needs their feet washed, metaphorically speaking? And are you willing to serve, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable? Living in the light also means abiding in love. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. Love is not just a feeling, it's a choice, a commitment to seek the good of others. But let's be honest, loving others isn't always easy. People can be difficult, selfish, or unkind. John's Gospel challenges us to love not because others deserve it, but because we've been loved first. It's a love that forgives, that sacrifices, that endures. Think about someone in your life who is hard to love. What would it take to love them not out of obligation but out of genuine compassion? Finally, living in the light means living with hope. The resurrection is the ultimate victory of light over darkness, life over death. It's a reminder that no matter how bleak things seem, there is always the possibility of new beginnings. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. What are the dark places in your life right now? And how might the light of Christ transform them, not by erasing the struggle but by giving it meaning and purpose? As we come to the end of this journey, I want to leave you with this question. What would your life look like if you fully embraced the eternal wisdom hidden in the Gospel of John? If you lived in the light, walked in truth, and abided in love, what kind of transformation might be possible? This is not just a story to read or a lesson to learn. It's an invitation to live differently, to step into the light and discover who you were created to be. What will you do with this invitation? The choice is yours.